Would you believe me if I told you that the reason New York Senate is Republican controlled is largely because of 8 Democratic lawmakers? That's the story of the members of the Independent Democratic Conference, IDC, aka New York's Trump Democrats. My name is Sami Disu. I teach African American history at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and on the side, I'm a professional activist.
We need in 2018 to make red seats blue seats. Whoever is the majority leader of the Senate determines what bills come to the floor for a vote. But if there's a Republican majority leader, those bills don't get to the floor. That's the fundamental issue in a legislative body. Other than 4 years since 1939, there has been Republican control of the Senate. We have to redistrict the state of New York for Congress, the Assembly, and the Senate based on the next census in 2020. So what they've done, as the Republican population has shrunk, as the population upstate has shrunk, they do these interesting things every time we redistrict. They make the districts in New York City smaller than the rest of the state so that you have more upstate senators per person than you do in New York City. That means if you live in New York City, you get less of a senator than if you're upstate New York. Right now, it's all about a Democratic majority leader and then building up the numbers and watch what we can do.
We can't arrive at a decision because the IDC are caucusing with the Republicans. If you at least caucus with the Democrats, then we'll really know who's the Democrat in the House that's standing against the legislation. You see the quandary we're in as constituents?
So, again, I was trying to be precise with my language,
Now, what's the IDC stand for? I think it stands for the I Don't Care Conference. Now, the way Albany works, the way the control of the majority party works, the only way that the minority party can get anything up is to sneak in an amendment to a bill. Hostile amendments. That's a technical phrase in Albany. It's a hostile amendment. Anything that's put forward by the minority party is hostile. So what did the IDC do? Did they say, yes, we support this, we will all vote for the funding? No! They walked out of the room and wouldn't let their votes be counted. It came time for the actual budget bill that the Senate Republicans were going to put forward. What it was, it would say, okay, to fund the schools, we're going to call it foundation aid. We're going to say it's foundation aid, which is the money that's driven by factors like student poverty, students with disabilities, English language learners. It's a progressive formula designed to close the gap. New York City was ineligible for 5 of those 6 formulas. Is that the kind of representation New York State needs? No. And they said for English language learners, we're going to keep English language learners, we're going to make it so that the district with the most English language learners in the state, New York City, is not eligible for that money.
With the IDC splitting from mainline Democrats, we have been hindered in our progress on critical issues like reproductive choice and health care and education funding and the DREAM Act. So it's really critically important that we are truly blue so that we can make the progress that so many yearn. People who are concerned about property taxes and about affordable housing and homelessness and healthcare and all of the issues that are dear to each and every one of you. And so the blue wave of progress is coming, and it's really a notice to those who stand in the way.
There's such a disconnect sometimes when you talk about upstate. So one of the ideas that I have is let's build some solid structure in Albany. I'm president of College Democrats at my school, so I reached out to SUNY Albany and some of the college dems up there. So when it's time to lobby for issues that pertain to college education here in New York, they can go if I can't go.
Even though there's nothing in the state constitution, there's nothing in the United States Constitution about Democrats or Republicans. The tradition is that Democrats kind of get together on the side and Republicans kind of get together on the side, and they kind of figure out which is the Democrat that has the most support, that will carry the most number of votes when they come for a floor vote to see who the leader will be. And every Republican votes for Flanagan. Now, every Democrat, by all expectations, should have voted for Andrea Stewart Cousins. And since there were more Democrats than Republicans, we would have a Democratic majority leader who would then call for a vote on the campaign for fiscal equity. And we would have gotten billions of dollars of education money for New York City? Who would have called a vote on those healthcare bills? Who would have called a vote on, for goodness sakes, codifying Roe v. Wade finally in New York State? We're talking about, treachery or dysfunction.
They work together? Didn't they used to work together? Why can't they?
That's what George Washington wanted us to have. George Washington wanted us to all work together and not break into factions.
My dear friends, we stand here to mourn the end of the sanctuary state. New York's 4.5 million immigrants, the Liberty Act and the Dream Act, which were both passed in the Assembly, yet again are going to die a painful death in the Senate committees. Immigrants are a very, very vulnerable group in this time of crisis under a president who has made it very clear that he will stop at no ends to separate families. We cannot stand by doing that.
The problems that are facing communities in upstate New York, they look differently than they look here. There are issues with jail overpopulation. There are issues of injustice. There is a magistrate system where judges in the courts up there don't even have to have legal degrees, don't have to be lawyers. There's jail expansion that's happening, overpopulation. And so what we really need to do as advocates and as groups is do the base building on Long Island, do the base building upstate New York where the landscape is different, so that our legislation includes components that will achieve justice statewide. And we have to be willing to put money towards bringing folks who are constituents of the Republican senators, Democratic senators, IDC senators, and bring them to Albany to hold our electeds accountable.
Something interesting is that this year people have been talking about the blue wave and focusing on young people particularly. But from what I saw on the IDC trail, I must say baby boomers and Generation Xers built this movement, period.
Those issues right now. I mean, one way right now is also broken windows is still a huge problem right now. And we can't have a sanctuary city with broken windows.
We have a governor who consistently says that money doesn't matter. The only people who ever say money doesn't matter is people who have money. We have a Republican Senate who brings home the bacon for their districts but are happy to shaft everyone else. And we have the IDC, which have turned their backs on their communities and their schools. And as a consequence, public schools are owed billions of dollars as a result of the campaign for fiscal equity. So Robert Jackson, over 23 years ago, he was a parent on the school board. Many of you know him as a politician, but he was a parent. And he was really concerned about the quality of education that his children are receiving. And he sued the state. And he said, New York State isn't providing my children with a high quality education. And in 2006, he won. The highest courts found that New York State is violating children's constitutional right to a sound basic education.
Every member in the majority, which are all the Republicans and the IDC together, they get millions of dollars to throw around within their district. That means their senior centers get $250,000 more each. The schools get additional money, their parks get additional allocations. It's a few $1 million for each member if you're a Republican or IDC member. A state senator is not about bringing back a few $1 million for your district. There are far larger issues like the billions of dollars we're talking about that you actually need for your schools.
I know that we have so many issues right now, that we have so many problems right now, but without any doubt, I can say that the biggest problem right now in New York is housing. I work on Jackson Heights, I work on Sunnyside, I work on Woodside, communities that have been living in this area for 40 years, and they're being displaced because the rents are going really high. You can see right now in Long Island City, you don't have to go so far. A one-bedroom apartment is around $3,700, and that's nothing that nobody can pay. We got a problem in Albany. Every time that we need to pass legislation in order to protect tenant rights, we never be able to do it. And then they come with this deal on Albany, with this called the Albany deal, and there is nothing about affordable housing in that deal. If we continue in this trend, they're building a city for the rich. and we're gonna have to move out from this city.
When you look in our communities, our community don't have enough resources. And when you look and you walk outside, is that Rikers Island is right next to you. And some of the people be like, Rikers is really dangerous. And it's not. It's the culture there. It's like you walking out your door and you have a crazy neighbor. You're gonna act crazy, and that's the culture that Rikers has created for everybody. And people don't know that what's going on in there is they're incarcerating someone. And when someone returns home, you segregating them from getting affordable housing, continuing their education, and even getting jobs. You won't know the understanding when you get turned down from every single job, even from cleaning a toilet. What our system has been doing is been locking up youth, men and women before they could find the full potential of what they could be in society.
Why did the No IDC movement reject Governor Cuomo's reunification deal? Because New Yorkers were deceived by a very similar reunification deal in 2014, also brokered by Governor Cuomo. I can confidently say that the No IDC grassroots movement was determined to send a message to all Democrats in Albany. If you betray the trust of the people, you will face the indignation of the community, regardless of support from New York's Democratic Party.
We send people into Albany to vote, not to imagine whether or not something will pass and then hedge accordingly.
We have, I would say, a slight difference in strategy, and I think really in how we're getting it done.
What's your name?
Sam.
Sam, my name is Sammy. Wonderful to see you at this action against Senator Marisol Alcantara. So tell me, why were you here today?
Because I feel like I'm doing what's right. Marisol Alcantara is betraying the Democratic Party and is helping the Republicans in keeping the Republicans and Trump in power and helping them do all the bad things they're doing.
Do you know about the single-payer bill that's in the Senate right now?
Yes, that was one of the things, as I know, that Bernie was working on and that I agree with, because our healthcare system's so messed up, and now that even Trump's trying to make it even worse. And Marisol Alcantara and the IDC are stopping them from passing it, probably, because they are keeping the Republicans in power. The Republicans are in power, and they won't let it come to the floor, because she's keeping them in power.
I'm Alex, I'm the Northeast Region Director at Human Water Action. So we're just outside and thought we'd just try to come up. As you know, there's no meaningful climate action in the session this year, and so we're here and trying to see if we can talk to somebody in the office about that and, urge the senator to come back to the mainline Dems.
Okay. So let's see.
Sure. So really, we want 100% renewables, but from my perspective, it's sort of disgraceful that nothing passed, including the CCPA.
So there was a letter sent out by 3 scientists to the Senate, to the legislators, telling them that they didn't feel as though the plan was substantial enough, that there was no actionable plans.
Then why not pass something more aggressive? I mean, is the argument that it's not aggressive enough?
Right. Well, they need time to come up with a more aggressive plan, one that will not solely just give authority to the DEC to fix these problems, but actually in writing give them these plans and
I want to talk to a policy person.
Yeah. Oh, well, you'd have to go up to Albany to do that.
Well, no, there's got to be somebody here.
So the IDC puts out a press release, and they say within their press release that education is one of their top priorities. And they called for a 3-year phase-in of the campaign for fiscal equity, which meant that we would see an additional $1.4 billion each year, specifically for public schools. However, when they put out their one-house budget bills, they did not include the billions of dollars. And when they had the opportunity, when on the floor, guess who was conveniently absent for that vote?
IDC.
The IDC.
You have a fighter who's going to stand up for public schools, who's not going to sit here and take money from corporate donors, who's going to be a champion for our community, especially for the Black and Latino community.
As we saw with New York's IDC Trump Democrats, money is no match for community spirit. Whenever we truly organize, we will make any elected official do what is needed for our communities, or replace them with someone who will. No IDC achievements have also shown us that when we unite behind only one candidate, our chances are very good. By taking control of our campaigning, we collectively facilitated endorsement sessions which yielded only single candidates per race. So, in effect, we achieved greater successes as a progressive movement pushing progressive candidates than we saw in the 2017 city council races, where a number of progressive candidates lost by splitting the vote.
One of the things that the pundits understood is that the state legislatures, which are the policy-making group for each individual state, have been a particular focal point for Republicans. They know that's where the policies get made on the state level. They know that's where redistricting happens on the state level. They know that if you have to stop things that are coming from DC, it can be stopped by policies created on the state level. They got that. And while we would wake up every 4 years, do what we thought was right, go back to sleep, they were working on keeping state legislatures in their control.
The Senate isn't passing voting reforms to encourage and support more people to vote, because the Republican Party, they see there are a lot more Democrats registered in New York State than Republicans registered in New York State. So they think, well, we certainly don't want to make it easier for people to vote. About the only bill that was supporting voters or registering to vote in New York State was actually brought to the floor that would allow private people in stores to register you to vote as long as you were buying a gun at the time. So suppose I go to Walmart and I don't want a gun license. Can I register to vote there too? Oh no, you have to be buying a gun license to register to vote. That's about the only voter rights bill I've seen the Republicans try to move in 16 years.
The dissemination of the knowledge that we all have now that leads to a shared understanding of the bait and switch IDC, that is our weapon. What we're doing here, just talking to people, hey, do you know what the IDC is? Do you know what they do? People typically who don't know, I know I was one of these people who found out, it's like getting slapped across the face. It's a con, and when you find out that you've been conned, you're pissed.
I was there. I was that activist that was out there going to Albany, and I'm fighting for this, but we spent too much time going to our friends as opposed to going to, I'm not going to call them our enemies, but the ones who are behaving complicated. And you got to go after the ones who are behaving complicated to get them to change your mind.
New York to California, individuals are heeding the call to stand up to the White House, stand up to number 45, to his corporate cronies, into the cabinet to get stuff done. But we know that the blame is not only in Washington at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, it's right here.
Our communities are in pain and can no longer wait for Albany to finish its game of musical chairs. We need progressive action, and we need it now. So we're gonna give our communities a choice. The working families in our districts will choose between the fair weather Democrats, the former members of the I'm with Donald Conference, the state senators who swapped their jobs for 30 pieces of silver to become state ribbon cutters, or they can elect real Democrats that are going to go to Albany and fight for the progressive values that we believe in this room.
We need to be better about coming out together to show that we agree on these things, I think. Because they can't divide and conquer.
No fake Democrats! Take the New York Senate back!
We will do our best to get as close as we can to Belmont's version. The final version is negotiation, but so thank you.
And all of us can reach out and make sure that we build the racial and economic diversity of this movement so we win. And we take out the IDC and we let Andrew Cuomo know that he cannot continue to go as a half-baked Democrat if he wants to lead me.
So we need you more than ever to be critical of the federal government, but also to be critical of what's happening in our backyards.
They can make up any titles they want. I don't give a damn about titles. That's not why I became a senator. Grow up do the right thing. I don't have to like everybody, but I want to have honest, principled people serving with me in the Senate.
And this is not the time when we are facing number 45 to be distracted by the politics in Albany. We've all got to be in this together.
Dear viewer, I appreciate you taking the time to see how the movement to defeat New York's Trump Democrats came together. The most effective antidote to unresponsive and corrupt governance is civic participation by those of us making up the 99%. Share this video and let's get out the vote in the coming midterm elections.